Hello and welcome to MetaNights. I'm Loku, a collector of stories, where we tell your story. Today's story is told by a retired senior citizen, also an openly gay man.
Hello everyone, I'm Sean. I am 65 years old. I am a gay man. I live in Shanghai.
In the past, we have interviewed young gay men. But, when we talk to these young gay men, rarely talk about how they imagine their later years, and their father's generation, also often ignorant of the existence of the gay community. This gave me a curiosity. Being gay in China is getting old. How will they live? And those who have aged out of homosexuality? And what kind of life have you experienced? We are lucky to have met Sean.
My own words as a teenager. In retrospect, then. In fact, when I was very young, probably in elementary school, or when I was not in elementary school, in fact, I had a crush on the same sex. Because the living environment at that time was similar to that of a compound, right? The kitchen, the bathroom, or the shower were all shared. If I think back on it now, I will have a special feeling for a little brother in the neighborhood. I will be willing to go with the little brother to go to the bath, usually will be willing to play with him is like this, Especially in junior high school, there are a few years of puberty when there is a very strong sexual urge, there is a very strong desire to have physical contact with the same sex and physical proximity to such a desire. In middle school, because it was the Cultural Revolution, we had a certain amount of time every year in middle school. It is to go to the countryside to work. After we arrived in the countryside, we lived in, for example, in something like a grain silo, or the old hall, not a residential environment, so we all slept in bunkhouses. When I was in high school, I went to the countryside with a boy who happened to sleep next door to me because I actually had a very strong urge to have physical contact with another boy, so I remember one night when he was asleep, I couldn't help but touch his body with my hand. But at that time there was no such a concept, so at that time there was confusion about the society we were exposed to and our culture, which told us that you should like girls, right, and have your own offspring in the future, so that you can finish your life. So then there will be confusion on why they are different from others, and many young people of that era are different.
Sean has not experienced the mountains and the countryside. He spent his adolescence on campus. November 1970, after a 4-year suspension of classes. Shanghai Foreign Language Institute resumes admissions and admits 508 students aged 16 or 17. Once on campus, this group of students takes 1 year of high school classes before enrolling in 4 years of undergraduate studies, and so begins 16-year-old Shan's college experience.
1970 to 1975 is basically the period of my college, is the time when I spent my adolescence. But at that time, our country was in the stage of the Cultural Revolution. At that time there was a very thin pamphlet which was similar to what adolescent hygiene knowledge on a very thin pamphlet. I remember it should be when I was in college, so I went to the library to go through it, that is, I have questions in my mind and want to find some answers through the book. So the book talks about homosexuality, but he classifies homosexuality as a sexual perversion. So at that time, reading such a definition, of course, the heart is very afraid.
1975, Sean graduated from university and joined a foreign trade company in Shanghai. After 3 more years, he got into a graduate school in Beijing and stayed in Beijing after graduation. Sean was already 28 years old at that time, and it was time for her to be urged to get married. His colleagues and relatives and friends around him also began to introduce him to someone. But the problem is that at this age, he still doesn't have a clear understanding of his homosexuality. He doesn't even know if there are gay people in China or not.
At that time, no matter what kind of person you are, in the end, you have to get married. So accept every blind date introduced by relatives and friends, but it always ends up not being able to go to the point of talking about marriage. From the age of 28 until I was 35 years old is the 7 years I so repeatedly, frustration is also very heavy. Because at that time is want to get married at that time is not to say that do not want to get married, then I think this is a thing that should be done. Right? In that case, I said that at that time, I was slowly getting older, so I also encountered a problem. That is, the unit had a batch of houses to be distributed, so I also applied for it, because I was not married, so the unit could not consider distributing this house to me. The leader of the unit said, "You do not rush, you do not get angry, you hurry to find a girlfriend, you hurry to get married, we are the first to solve your housing problems." I said that if I don't get married, you won't give me a house, so I went to argue with them. The leader said, "Oh, never mind, the unit also has a policy, you have not been married to 45 years old, I am the first to give you to solve your housing problems." Then I thought, I have to be 45 years old before you can solve my housing problem, so I will have to live alone in this single dormitory for the next few years. When I was 35 years old, I met a guy by chance, and it was a coincidence. Then the boy became my first love. Is quite amazing to say that in that era of the 80s and 90s or earlier, it is not the same as now, because now the internet era, many young friends, they want to meet their peers, there are some social software or something. At that time, there is no. In fact, there was a way to say that some of the parks we have in Beijing may be known to you. We'll call it a fishery. What does it mean is to go there to meet people, like saying in that stroll around, then it is like some people are fishing there, including you like Chengdu or Sichuan, what they may be called drift field. There may be different sayings everywhere. But it is often in a public place in the community, the traffic is more convenient, a public toilet as a central point in the surrounding area, forming a secret area like a. I was not aware of the existence of such other people in the outside world, nor did I know that there was a so-called point of existence in Beijing. I passed by such a place very accidentally. That night I had dinner in my flat, and then, after finishing my things, I rode my bicycle to the Xiqing side and prepared to stay at a friend's house the next day to go to the examination room. Then I passed by the West Park Hotel, a street green. When I had to use the bathroom, I went in. I was in the toilet on the inside, and then a young man came in. I finished the toilet, I came out. Well, after I came out, then I rode my bike and went this way, and then this time he followed me over, so I can feel that this person from this place, he is always behind me and following me this way. So after riding ahead for a while, I stopped and he came over to talk to me. Of course I can't remember how to talk to me at that time, and I can't remember what I said. Maybe something like, "What are you doing out? Maybe you're out for a walk," or "How come you're not home so late?" Maybe something like that. He is smaller than me, I am 35 years old, he is 25 years old, and I am about the same height. It looks like that, quite sturdy look. Of course he gave me the feeling that I feel safe. I'll know what it means to have a heart-to-heart at this time. I said that at that moment, I was in that moment, I said this person could be my kind of person. Although I do not know what kind of situation is out there in society, but I have a feeling that something's going to happen. Then we chatted because it was still the late 80s, so I thought, I can't keep chatting like this on the roadside. Then we said that okay, then we left a phone number for each other. But I think about myself is also quite bold, because at that time the phone is all unit phone, and the unit phone may be placed in the communication room or in the office of the leader of the head. That night I don't know why I was so bold, I left my unit's phone number with him, and then he left his unit's phone number with me. This way, and then went back after 3 days, and then the boy called me. Then say, "Hey, wanna meet together, chat or something?" Because my workplace is in the city, he is in the suburbs, so I said that's okay. I said, "If you want to come to the city on weekends, come over and we'll meet and chat." After a few days he came and we talked, and I was happy, and he was happy. We'll talk about it, and then the weather will be late, and he'll say that he can't go back. Then I said okay, I said you can live here anyway, I am very convenient. I said I have a room of my own, and I said you will sleep in my bed tonight, and then I will go to the room of my colleague next door to live like this. Then he said, "You're a psycho." And now I think about it, of course it's funny, right? But I really didn't understand anything at that time. But then you feel like something is going to happen in the dark. That night in my dormitory and is a single bed is very small and then took a stool on the side of the bed is that spell a little. Then that night we were in the same bed, so the first night, of course, that is, what should happen happened. At that time, I was completely ignorant and did not know what was going to happen, but when it was going to happen, I immediately understood that this was what I wanted. We were here the first night, and then the next day he went to work. In that case, I'll ask him to come again in a few days, so I'll be happy, right? Let's say I met such a friend and then we can do something that I want to do a lot, but I don't know what I want to do. Then I asked him to come to him again. I remember it very well. After about the third or fourth time, I asked him about it, and I said I read in the newspaper that it seemed. There is a saying. It says that if a person has sex with the same sex 3 times, he may be gay. I said, is that so? He said, you are the psycho? Then I thought, hey, at that time really do not know anything. When this thing suddenly happened, this person opened all at once. I don't have the words to say, but you know that this thing is what you want. We are very happy when we are together, are very happy, talk a lot of things you cannot say to anyone before, including very secret, and cannot tell some things, then can have someone to tell you. This will give you a feeling of liberation. Because for 35 years they were in a very depressed state, very confused and struggling, and then suddenly there was this person and you could say anything to him. But at least I could make a decision for myself at that time. Just say yes, I do not dwell on the past, I have a lot of very much let myself say that there is no way to sort things out, I will not think about it again. I just live the life I want, no matter how the future ends, that's the way I want to go.
From that day on, Sean never went on a date and never tried to enter marriage again. Many years later, Sean realized that in those days most gay people, like him, did not know if there were any of their own kind in the world, which was a kind of loneliness and misery that people could not imagine. Only when they find out they're not the only ones in the world who like the same sex can they start to learn to accept themselves. This process is known to them as entering the circle.
Of course, I just met my first boyfriend after slowly themselves with the so-called circle. We now say that our community, right? At that time, we actually did not use the word gay. When we talk about a certain person, for example, we have met a new person or a new face appears, then we may now directly ask him whether he is gay. That's what they ask now, right? We said at that time, is he? I heard that who is also. We will definitely not say the word gay. In those days, because of the homosexuality, he was a very stigmatized thing, because at that time our country had not abolished the crime of hooliganism. So the homosexual community may still be exposed or caught before 1997, and will be punished under the name of hooliganism. And there's another one. Before 2001, the psychiatric diagnosis regulations in our country. We still classify homosexuality as a mental illness, so in this context, as a homosexual, you may be a potential criminal, and medically you are a mental illness. So one of the feelings at the time was that we ourselves were without identity and you were without legal status, to say the least. You can only live in a dark corner, you have to live, you cannot always live with a criminal, a potential criminal's hat to live. That's heavy, right? I know some of my friends who are in the workplace because they have such things with some people of the same sex, whether it's sex or these relationships, they will be sent to reformation or they will be sentenced to prison. But the specific sentence, how many years, I cannot remember right now. This is a friend who was not particularly familiar with me, he was sent to labor reform, but their unit is also good. After a few years of his labor reform, still accept him back, it will not let him do his original work, and then arranged for him to burn the boiler. In fact, it is a very clear is a punishment of an arrangement. There is also an old gay man in Beijing named Old Paris, and if we search online, we can see his story. He was reported by people and punished by the police, so he even lost his job. Because he was a teacher in the late 80s or early 90s when the whole social environment in China was that people were not able to move freely, unlike nowadays when you can find a profession or change cities to live in as long as you can have a place to accept you can solve your own survival problems. But at that time there was no once you lose your job, it is a very, very serious problem. He really is a matter of life and death. So we will be especially careful not to be found in the relationship. On the other hand, because many homosexuals are concerned about the exposure of their identity, they may do what is expected of them by mainstream values or mainstream society. For example, many of them will enter into marriage.
Compared to many gay men of that era, Sean was lucky. He wasn't beaten into insanity, nor was he cited for hooliganism, and his family and workplace didn't force him to get married. But many of Sean's friends did not make it through, including his first boyfriend.
I was dating the first guy for about a year, and then one night he came to us. He said he wouldn't stay here tonight and he was going back. I walked him to the bus stop, and then he told me, "Let's not go out anymore, let's just leave it at that." Then I understand that he may want to break up with me. I asked him why, what happened to him. He told me that his family wanted me to get married, so I thought I couldn't continue dating you. It doesn't say much more, does it? Then I thought I could not stop him. Of course, my heart was very hard. I hope he did not break up with me, but he was leaving, and I did not know what to do. The atmosphere was very cold, right? After he finished with me, I didn't know what to do, and it was very awkward standing there on the bus. Then the bus came, then he got on the bus and left. Is this way? Then we did not contact for a long time. At that time it was very confused. In a social environment that is very closed, when we lose a person we love very much, we do not know when we will be able to meet a second. I think it is precisely because of the repression of the whole society and the whole atmosphere that we are often unable to express ourselves in a very clear language. A lot of things are very you say is depressing, where you say is a lot of things is light, or is that kind of helplessness, and then you do not know what the future will be.
A year after breaking up with her first boyfriend, Sean met her second boyfriend. At this time, his mother felt that her son could not get a house in Beijing and there was no one to take care of him, so she asked Sean to go back to Shanghai to develop. So in 1993, Sean returned to Shanghai and joined a foreign company. Fortunately, this American company is very friendly to the LGBT community. The company even provides the partner of a gay employee with the same company benefits as the partner of a heterosexual employee. In such an environment, Sean never came out in the company but also saved a lot of mental pressure. Sean more pressure or from the family. In the issue of marriage, he can only choose to obscure the ink into the deep.
Because when I was very young, my father died when I was a teenager. I returned to Shanghai from Beijing in 1993. My mother also asked me this question. I usually just perfunctory her. In the following years, my mother also kept mentioning this problem. Then I think I need to have a more serious conversation with my mother. I remember once we talked about this topic at home. I was answering my mother, and I said, "Look, I'm in my 40s now, and I'm working well." I said that everyone may be at different ages to do different things to solve their own life problems. I have passed the stage of falling in love to find an object and then start a family. At that time, I did not express clearly with him that I do not want to get married. Of course, my answer is certainly a pretext, not a real one idea. It is about coming out of the closet, this thing. My mother passed away in 2000. So before 2000, there was no way for me to discuss this with her in one language. Because you say in the end the words become, then you are a hooligan or then you are a psychotic right? Because the relevant laws of this country are set out in this way. Then it would be difficult for me to communicate further with my family about this issue, and I'm afraid it would become a kind of mutual pulling up. So that means my parents and I are not out of the closet.
In 2008, Shan's foreign company started to lay off employees due to the financial crisis. Sean lost his job during the year because he had more free time. Sean met several people on the internet who were interested in doing Friends of the Gay and Lesbian Community Chest. They co-founded the Gay and Lesbian Family and Friends Association to serve the young gay community and their parents. In 2014, the Gay and Lesbian Family and Friends Association had grown and Sean had reached retirement age, so he stepped down from his position as president of the association and became a regular volunteer.
In fact, before I retired, I did not have a clear understanding of my age. I did not feel old. By 2014, I was suddenly an old homosexual. At this time, I found that many of my friends would come to me and ask me, "How do you live your retirement life when you are old?" In this way, I will find that people seem to be very concerned about the topic of homosexuals in old age and about retirement. And from the parents' point of view, very worried that you are not married and do not have their own children. What do you do in the future when you are old? This is a question that is often asked. Then we have a project like the 11 documentary in 2014.
According to Shan's original plan, he hoped to interview 20 older gay men over the course of a year. But in fact, only 9 of the 70 or 80 older gay men he and his volunteers have approached so far this year have accepted the invitation. Many people, despite recognizing the value of their program, always feel that their experience is a dishonorable one. The shadow of the times overshadowed them throughout their lives, and they remained fearful until their old age. And a more realistic reason is that most of the 70 to 80 elderly people have entered into marriage, in their view, to their families to hide things for a lifetime. To this age, there is no need to make waves.
I remember very well an old man who was a teacher in a school in the township. He never knew that such a group existed in society until after he retired. Because his children are working in Shanghai, he came to Shanghai to bring his children's grandchildren, right? One day, he went to a park by chance and was approached by others, and he realized that there was such a group in society. So I am such a person. So I asked him, "Are you now self-identifying as gay, and would you consider divorcing your wife or would you come out to her?" He said no, because it is already at this age. How to rearrange life is not an easy decision to make. He has his wife and then his son and his grandson. He has to face a big family. How he can deal with this interpersonal relationship is very difficult for him. One of our interviewees said that marriage is actually like a New Year's Eve gift, and you have to have it too. At the same time, it can also cause harm to heterosexuals in a marriage, whether they are women or men. We must be clear that this is not only a personal tragedy. In fact, I think it is also a social tragedy and a tragedy of the times. We talked to these old people, and they said that if possible, you should not get married, because this marriage for them both. It is decades is a very uncomfortable and difficult such a process. You're talking about gay people getting older, or the generation of gay people when they get older. What kind of life do they have and how do they deal with that in their old age? Through our study, we found that most of the elderly people, they enter into traditional marriages. He relies more on the traditional marriage system to support his retirement life. But at the same time, we can also see that there are some people who have never entered into a marriage without a family or a marriage without children, and they are living on their own. When they enter old age, their social circle is shrinking, and when they encounter difficulties, what should they do? One of the old people is that last year, the head of the family suddenly happened and then fainted at home, and no one knew that 2 days later, their family members, his brothers and sisters said how 2 days did not see him, send friends, and then rushed over and called the police, called 120 and then sent to the hospital emergency, fortunately, saved. This is a very real problem, right? From my own point of view, I think one of the things that bother me is the housing problem, because I have been renting an apartment in Shenyang recently. He may not rent this house to me anymore. In that case, I will lack a stable security in this place, lack of a sense of security.
If someone asks you now what to do when a gay person gets old,
I still can't give a universal answer. In today's China, aging is a complex proposition. What's more, older gay men and lesbians are a marginalized group within a marginalized group, and many of their basic needs are ignored and sometimes even stigmatized. For example, they still have sexual needs and would like to find senior living facilities that cater to the gay community. I hope that one day the voices of the gay and lesbian community will be heard by policymakers when the topic of aging is discussed. And the best I can do in the present is to live my old age well and give an example to others. So my current situation is that I do not have a family, I do not have children, so I do not have a boyfriend, I am living on my own. The state I'm in is what many parents and homosexuals fear will happen. But how can I say that I have come to this day? I think that in fact you want to live well, more how you can better arrange your daily life, rather than whether you have a partner to accompany you every day. So plus I will put a lot of time into doing charity work every year. I will also go around to travel to playa, so I think I still live quite full of life. My deep impression is that once I was outside to attend an event, and after the event was over there was a mother. He came over and told me quietly in private, he said, "Sean, when I see you, I have confidence in my children's future life." And then at that moment I thought, I'm really standing up for myself because I can be seen by others and I can play my role.
You're watching MetaNights, and I'm Anchor Loco. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.